help me give a warm welcome to the Managing Director, Multichoice, Nancy Matimu.
Hello, can you hear me now? Okay, so my name is Nancy Matimu. I am also Mrs. Matimu. I am also Mama Waka, a mother of 5 children, and I take great pride in that, first and foremost, because I value family. So I'm here to talk to you about content aggregation and consumption, and I don't have a presentation, because I'm in the business of storytelling. In the business of storytelling, it's where we curate content and then format it, and then determine what mode that we want to tell that story in. So I want to make a few assumptions that I'm speaking to very experienced and seasoned people in the room, marketers, because I can see obviously enjoy wonderful conversation, and thank you for ending the note on storytelling and purpose-led brands. And I can also see Sami Thuo, I see obviously Crispina Chola, I see various other persons in the room that are really seasoned marketers, but I also see young upcoming marketers. So I will try to balance the conversation, but I try to put myself in the shoes of a young marketer and also even a seasoned marketer who is facing challenges or who has to confront the current headwinds that we're facing in terms of how we evolve as marketers. And I decided to first and foremost put myself in the context of a strategic marketer. So I am first and foremost a marketer before general management. I started my career in the tech world, and then really didn't like doing wires and doing boxes and fixing memory cards and working on systems operations. And then I actively actually made a decision to move into marketing because I loved marketers, I love salespeople, and I just wanted to be them and connecting with people. And that's how I found myself into marketing. I had absolutely no training, no background whatsoever, and I struggled. And I remember the first opportunity I was given was to go and sell computers to East Africa breweries. I didn't even know where to start. I didn't know there's something called a pitch. I didn't even know there was something called product positioning. I had absolutely no idea that you need to make an appointment beforehand. I was total rookie. And along the way, I really struggled to really carve my space. And I decided to speak to various people who are obviously experienced. And I learned that sales and marketing is not what people say or what they used to say. That it's, for those guys that really, it's that career that, you just chance by. It really, as Anjoy said, it's an art, it's a science. And that's when I undertook a course in strategic marketing, all the way to chartered marketing. I became a chartered marketer, and then did everything from customer care to product to, So when I speak and tell you about content aggregation, I want to speak to all the customer experience people in the room, the marketing teams, the people that deal with product processes, people dealing with people at any one time, because whichever way you look at it, strategic marketing cuts and basically touches all these different spheres of the different business operations. So what is content aggregation in the first place, and what is content consumption? I cannot talk to you about content aggregation and content consumption without telling you about the history and the evolution of content. So I'm going to talk to you about 5 things in general. The first thing is about the evolution of content, so that you can be able to tie the pieces together and maybe just drawing and stringing on to Anjoy's conversation. As you can see, with 5 children, I've been around for a while. It's not 15 years, it's well over 20 years experience. So I've been there for quite some time. And I have been there during the storytelling, when storytelling evolved from listening to stories from your grandmother. So I'll talk to you about that. Then I'll also talk to you about the evolution of content distribution, and also the evolution of content consumption. And then we'll have a conversation about what has actually happened from monopolization of the monopoly of content origination, how content is designed, how content was basically distributed, and how monopolistic that space was, into what we are seeing today, which is a highly democratized space of content distribution and consumption. And then we'll talk about what that democratization has led us to, which is pretty much a world of complexity and the fact the world is yearning for simplification and unification of content. And then finally, I will speak to you about the strategic marketing applications and the implications of these different elements of my story this evening. So I grew up in Mount Kenya, somewhere in the Mount Kenya region, in a place called Gitaro. And we grew up in a country home, pretty much that was a convent, a nun's convent back in the day. And then we also then happened to move out of that convent when I was about 16 years old. And it was the very first time I went into a river. Those of you that know about growing up in the countryside, you have to have swum in a river. And I thought I could swim in the river and make an attempt at swimming at the river. And in my father's house, coming from up the hill where the house sits, and you walk down through the coffee bench terraces, you walk through some trees, some rocks, and then you get down, into the valley at the bottom of the ridge, and there is the river. And it was quite a swollen river. It's called Kayahwe River. And I actually did attempt to put my foot in an area where the water seemed very still. And the fact is that in a river, the water is constantly flowing in a particular direction. And the hardest thing that you can ever attempt is to actually try to swim upstream. It's the most painful thing. If you don't take anything away from the conversation that I'm going to have with you today, imagine trying to swim upstream with the water beating at you and the torrents beating at you, and how much pain and how much effort and how much drag that there is. Now, any brand, whether it's a personal brand, you as an individual, or whether it is even an FMCG brand, a physical brand, that does not appreciate the changes that are happening today, is a brand attempting to swim upstream when everybody is going downstream, and it's painful, and it's hard. And those of us that have found ourselves at the point of that intersection will understand. The reason why I'm telling you this story is that the content has evolved. We used to sit beside the fireplace listening to our grandmothers, telling us stories. And the storytelling was one way, and we would listen. In the king's courtyard, we would meet and aggregate in the courtyard to listen to the king, and the king then would deliver whatever message he had. For people to know that the king had a message, there was someone running around the entire village, calling out and ringing what was called the big bell. And when you heard the big bell, you knew there was going to be a big announcement from the king. Our very early on marketing took exactly the same form. It was voice-based. And even the very early communication, whether it was radio, it was voice-based. And therefore, we were big on voice communication. And therefore, we put in a lot of money as marketers in choice of communication that matched exactly the nature and the platforms that were around storytelling. What is content? Content is actually stories. It is either stories that are written, stories that are spoken, stories that are acted. And those stories can be stories around news. It could be stories about lifestyle. It could be stories about documentary. It could be stories about education. Content is broad. Then we moved on to the days when we had to wait and hear from the king, or wait and hear from our grandmothers. And those of you that grew up in, whoever heard the story about a giant when you're growing up? Please, just indulge me. At least Crispin Nachola, I'm sure, looking at your age and your hairs, I can tell. Sammy, I know. Yeah, how many of you had stories about giants? No? Please put up your hands like brave Kenyans. Yeah, okay, great. So lots of you. So we were always told about these stories, about this giant, or let me tell the story as it was told to me. That there were very beautiful girls that went to the other ridge to visit during a dance. And they went and met very handsome men. But on their way home back to their village, the handsome men opted to try to escort them back home in the evening. And the most beautiful girl left the most handsome and good-looking guy. However, along the way, she disappeared and was never seen again. And it happened over and over again. Until one day, it was discovered that this handsome young man had, at one point when they would get through when they're trying to get home, he would open up, and at the back of his head, he actually had this huge mouth. And then he would then transform and be mono-eyed, and the eye would be in the middle of his head. And then he'd actually transform into the giant, and he'd eat up the girls. And that's basically the way the story went. And of course, the grandmothers would end with, do not look at every other man that you see that's handsome. Do not go home with any man. Just make sure that we know them, right? So it was about morals, it was about social norms, it was about setting, it was about basically defining norms. Then storytelling evolved. It evolved to, people don't want to hear stories around just listening to somebody. They want to act them out and throw in a bit of spice. So acting, skits, theater came to being. But even then, you will recall, those of you that watch Vioja Mahakamani, even if you do not watch it on set, on TV, or listen to Vitimbi, or to Riane back in the day, there was always a story behind it. It's about social norms. It could be civic education. There was always a story. But it evolved from someone telling you this is what you must do, or one person, to people acting out and then saying it on video. And marketing and communication also evolved to communication that was designed around dissemination through acting or video. And then we evolved beyond voice and audio to audiovisual, from audiovisual to then what we are hearing today. I can watch anything wherever I am at. But just before we get to that point, there was a big transition towards curating content that could be believable and credible. Because remember, the king was credible and believable. Your grandmother was credible and believable. Right? So how do you ensure that the content that you're then designing is believable and credible? And therefore, content curation became a big thing that connects the different audiences that you're speaking to. And when marketers and advertisers choose, they will make choice based on the affinity, and that affinity was built on believability and credibility. So now come the 21st century and come into the digital evolution and what's happening. We have seen content now evolve from a monopoly from video into different forms. Google's brand purpose is actually organizing the world's information. And they started by organizing the world's information that was in text form. That's content, but available on digital. The difference is anybody can put out content out there today. So we moved from monopolization to democratization of content production. And then it started to evolve as technology evolved into video content, into what we know it as it is today. You need to understand as a marketer, or we need to understand as marketers, that evolution. Because the market as it evolves, then there is a dominating style or the dominating platforms that you must choose. Today, a lot of marketers and organizations are beginning to shift their marketing budget significantly into digital. Because if you spend your day out there making a lot of noise, there are very few people listening to you. In fact, they are busy on their tablets or on their smartphones or their mobile phones. So it's important to keep up with the evolution and to understand the direction that storytelling and content is going because marketing and communications basically follow storytelling. And you had Angie also speak to the fact that they're now winning in the marketplace by converting from just talking about product to storytelling. So so that's about the evolution of content. But let's talk about the content distribution and a bit about content consumption. So we would sit and consume content, or spend time Googling, or get home at a particular hour to watch TV. But today, I get entertained, I get all my news, I get all the education and everything I want even before I get home, right? Because I got a TikTok video, I got a WhatsApp video, I got a joke somewhere, a meme on Twitter, and I'm thoroughly entertained, because that's what entertainment is all about, right? Right? Gee, are you guys that bored? Are you keeping up with the conversation? Okay, all right, so let me carry on. So by the time you get home, you're pretty much done. Because a lot of things have happened. As storytelling was evolving, the mode and distribution, the platforms of storytelling and content have evolved. And therefore, the production platforms, the distribution platforms, and the consumption platforms have also evolved. So if today you are not then designing, and now I'll speak about strategic marketing from a product perspective. If your products that you're designing are not designed for discovery in the digital world or the metaverse, you're in trouble. Right? So I'm constantly on CNN every morning, and I'm on BBC every single morning. I am on Citizen and various other FTAs every single morning. But you can imagine, with the traffic in Nairobi, by the time I leave Kiambu Road, me, I'm that person who lives in Runda View on Kiambu Road. We don't live in Runda, but we live in Runda View, across the road. So when you're giving people direction, you get to Runda, cross the road. That's where we are. So you can imagine driving from that stretch, and I have to wait through traffic, and my office is all the way up into Ngong Road, opposite the Polo Club, at the ASK showground. It's a long journey, and through traffic could take you 2 hours. Then obviously I can't carry my TV set with me, but there's one sure thing I will always have, which is the smartphone. We're a mobile-first, digital-first economy in Kenya. We are today, as Multichoice, in 50 African countries. In all these 50 African countries, there are about 52 states. In Africa, we just don't operate in the countries that have trade embargoes with the United Nations or other world trade organizations. This continent is a mobile-first, digital-first, the first point of discovery before you even open your TV or you switch on your computer, whether it's your laptop. The one sure thing that somebody somewhere has switched on is this. And I can tell you, I am seeing a lot of adverts for East Africa breweries. Lots. And because maybe I enjoy some gin, maybe that's why I see a lot of gin adverts. I see a lot of that. And they have actually shifted, if I'm not wrong, into giving a huge focus to off-trade. And off-trade is driven largely by digital engagement. I mean, think about it, it's a beer. They're not selling telecommunication products. They're not selling digital products, but they've gone online. I also see a lot as well from Unilever as well. I see a lot of Sunlight adverts as well. I don't know what Crispin is doing because he's in dark marketing. But I'm sure he's still winning in the marketplace somehow, and he'll tell us about it. But as the content is evolving and the platforms are evolving, the first thing that you must have is a product anyway to sell. The way you design that product, even from an appeal perspective, you have to design it from a digital native appeal perspective. I've worked in the digital world pretty much, in tech world, all my life. And when you're designing products, there is something that we speak about, the user experience and the user interface, or the UX UI, we also talk about customer journeys and customer experiences. So when we design, the primary persona we are designing for is the digital persona. Same case with product. So today you might be asking me, and the MC said, every house had DSTV. Has. Every house had GoTV. Has, had. I heard you, and I hear you all. But we are very busy also recognizing that there is that shift. In Kenya, we have 12 million households. Only 1 million have access to high-speed broadband. So we still have a lot of households that are still on traditional TV, what we are calling traditional pay TV, with DSTV and GoTV. But again, if we continue swimming upstream, at one point you'll get tired and you're going to drown. So we've now begun swimming downstream, and that's why we have Showmax, and that's the reason why we are now designing products to sit on platforms that the digital native can consume. I want to reiterate and reinforce, it doesn't matter whether you're in physical goods or not, like Unilever or East Africa Breweries, or in the service industry, or whether you are in the digital space like we are in. If you don't innovate, if you don't evolve and build products and design their appeal with a digital orientation, and then move on also to not only designing those products, but also defining price points and pricing that appeals to a highly commoditized world. Because what digital has done, it has created fragmentation. And this fragmentation has therefore also led to commoditization. And with commoditization, it means you have to become smart about your pricing. So whichever way that you look at it, whether it's a physical good or service or whatever, you have to look at it from the context of the digital native. So when we speak about democratization of content, so you all know, I will be very impartial. You all know today you're consuming content on FTA, on pay TV like us, on Showmax like our platforms. You've got the DSTV app that you can watch wherever you are at. But of course, you've got YouTube, right? You have TikTok, you have WhatsApp, you have Netflix, right? So can you imagine how that world is for a time-discerning person? Time-discerning person. The digital native is highly time-discerning. So what's happening that as we see this fragmentation in content consumption or content availability, we are also seeing an extremely stressed consumer, an extremely distraught consumer. And someone is saying, could you please just simplify this world for me? So we are actually now moving into the world of simplification and aggregation. And not just in entertainment content, even in financial products. You have seen M-Pesa go to the M-Pesa super app. You have seen other apps designed for super capabilities, where you started off with simple capabilities, and then they build different use cases. They digitize so many different customer journeys, and all of a sudden you then realize I have too many apps. I need to bring everything together. I need to aggregate. And the reason why I speak to aggregation was a traditional model that we used, and DSTV is a super aggregator of content. We aggregate across all genres. But then the customer said no. And the customer said, no, I want to choose I want my own genre entertainment from Netflix or from Showmax. Then I want my own sporting content. Maybe I want to go to Formula 1 once in a while, but I also want to go to the Super Sport Picks. I want to go to BetKing, and there are all these apps, and it's the whole world, and it's just too complex. So as we move along, we are also seeing the world circling back to content aggregation and super aggregation, but in a different form in the digital world. Why is that important? Because even your marketing dollars, the farther you try to fragment them, they don't take you far. You need to look for aggregated platforms that can help you have high precision and the highest return on your marketing dollars. So in that journey, what we are not seeing, you might have seen, obviously, YouTube is an example of a super aggregator of every content. The Google platform is a super aggregator of any form of content that you want to find. The DSTV app is a super aggregator of all genres. But we're going a step further and saying it's not just what you produce. So just to tell you how in touch we're getting with the reality of aggregation, you don't want to pay for Netflix, for Disney Plus because you want to catch up with the Kardashians, for instance. And those of you that have followed me once in a while, you've heard that my favorite program is? You're not with me. My favorite program, if you want to know, is? Just take a guess. Yeah, because many of us will not tell you the truth about what they watch when they are alone. But because you don't want, you're in touch with your passion, with your own, you're connecting with what really makes you happy. So when I'm connecting with what makes me happy, I watch the Kardashians. So the Kardashians now has moved to the Disney Plus. So just recently, about 2 weeks back, we launched the DSTV streamer in South Africa. The DSTV streamer gives you all the world of DSTV. And then you have Disney Plus on top of it. And of course, you heard about our partnership that we announced much earlier with Netflix about 2 years ago, where we shall be moving into also across the same journey. So the world of super aggregation is actually coming back to simplify and give you at least a platform where you can choose a single point of a platform where you can choose what you want to be able to access as a consumer. So content aggregation, whether it is on the OTT platforms, over-the-top platforms like YouTube or Google or whatever, or TikTok, whatever other platform. TikTok also doing quite a bit of aggregation across. The difference that both of them are user-generated. Our other platforms are more curated in the sense that the content has to be curated, reviewed, and sort of follow up a certain governance structure. The world is still a very viable business model. But what this has done, nevertheless, is still continue to respect the democratization of content origination, distribution, and consumption. And the fact that we have a world of complexity that requires unification and simplification means that you have to be sharper as a strategic marketer to be able to understand how you're going to win in the 7 spaces of marketing, the 7 P's of marketing. How do you design your product to ensure that it basically wins? You're able to win in the marketplace in these spaces. Content aggregation. How do I then, if I'm a content creator, how do I create content that is available across all these different platforms? Because if you design content that can only run on YouTube, only can't run on TikTok, cannot run on let's say WhatsApp, cannot be deployed onto DSTV app or Showmax, you're then actually disenfranchising yourself from full ability to monetize and commercialize. So ability to commercialize will be dependent on how well you understand the different platforms. And if you're a designer of content, some of us create our own content in-house for marketing purposes, then you have to be able to cut across and basically straddle across these different platforms. So I'm speaking to product managers in particular when I speak to that. When you speak about pricing as well, in this world of different forms of content, how do you then define pricing across these different platforms? Because you're going to have a freemium model, because some models like YouTube, for instance, or TikTok are pretty much free, but you also have the premium. But then you also need to be able to monetize, where you can bring the content to DSTV and we pay you for the content, which means that you actually have ability to actually build content and that enables you to rule in the world of super aggregation across the different types of platforms, and therefore be able to monetize and commercialize even better. So when you also think about distribution, think about distribution of your content. Where do you want to distribute it? So the different channels of distribution again. So there are all these different forms, and again, audio visual right there, but audio still very active. You still want to be able to ensure that your content can be consumed on podcasts. Because if you just think single channel, you'll be losing out on this whole world of the digital native that is straddling across different platforms and who is trying to aggregate his world somehow in all these different platforms. So again, when you think about distribution, distribution is not necessarily the traditional distribution as we understood it. There are different channels of distribution. So even today, as we look at how to distribute our content, we have traditional platforms. We are creating content for digital, but we are also creating content that can actually be consumed directly onto user-generated platforms. Then obviously, we spoke about pricing, we talk about promotion. When you are designing content and you're a content creator, so back in the day, the most popular person, yes, obviously, was the king. Your grandmother was also the other most popular person. I think the other popular person was the church leader. And then we had the chief who was very popular. And those were influencers back in the day. Yeah. And I knew my chief. In fact, where I come from, they were, you'd not just call them so-and-so back in the day. Actually, we never knew them by name. We called them the great, the big one, Munene, something like that, right? Because that's how revered they were. Okay? They were the celebrities of the day. When you design your content, or when you are consuming content, or when you are promoting and designing your promotions, and here I'm talking about advertising, everything, right? And you're looking for the platforms that you want to choose. Most of you, especially if my teams are here, they will tell you the first thing that we do is we look at the size of the audience and the affinity, just like we did back in the day. But this time round, we're not looking at radio audiences per se, TV audiences. They're still good and important. But we are looking at, let's say, Crazy Kenna. Yeah, Crazy Kenna, how is he connecting? What sort of content? Yeah. But then Crazy Kenna only speaks to a particular audience, maybe Karadu. How is she connecting with the sports fans? Right. But that's not the only platform that we are putting our money in. Now, if you have a bit of money, you can afford to be able to be in a multiplicity of platforms. Now, Samithu of Saracen was with me when we launched, in my previous life, when we launched Safaricom Home. It had the smallest budget in the history of Safaricom when we were launching. Safaricom budgets are in the tunes of hundreds of millions and billions. Safaricom Home had less than 100 million to work with. But again, the fact that it's a digital brand and a multiplicity of all these options exist, the choices have to be made and had to be made. And the choice we made was, why go on TV and radio and we don't have coverage everywhere? So we chose to use our money very cleverly, and we would go, let's say, to Four Ways Junction. That weekend, we activate in Four Ways Junction and acquire and do what we need to do. And we would have the street polls Four Ways Junction for just that short period. And then we would move on to the next, carry our street polls, go to the next with our billboard, the next estate. Here we come, here we are. Okay? Until, obviously, critical mass is reached, and then you can afford to do what you want to do. It's the same case with content aggregation and content consumption. There's so much content. It's unbelievable. I mean, in a week, because my job requires me to understand content, I'll have watched Single Kiasi. I have watched Crime and Justice. I've watched Hula Baloo. I will then go and watch. Have you heard of Single Kiasi? Yes. And you love it, yeah? Yes. I love you. I love you. I love you. No, Single Kiasi is about stories, true stories about Nairobi and what's happening, the reality. Is it? Yeah, half married, half divorced, half single, half. You're not quite sure. We can't make up our minds, Kenyans, right, or Nairobians. They call it Kanairo. So I'll have watched all that. Then I'll have watched Bridgerton. Yeah, because I have to understand what's happening. Have you watched Bridgerton? Squid Game? Yeah, many Kenyans will not want me talking about Squid Game, and many people who have, it has its extremes. And of course, Zora, Maria, Selena. Huh? Seriously, Crispin, what do you watch? Bridgerton. William, what do you watch? No, you're lying. He doesn't even know what. There's nothing called all of them. There's no show called all of them. All right. But anyway, there's just so much to watch. But if you read the book by Robert Iger, who was the Disney CEO for 15 years, where he talked about his journey as CEO, the ride of a lifetime, and he says one thing for a fact: they built Disney using epic shows. If you speak to Netflix, they will tell you they have built Netflix with epic shows. If you speak to DSTV, DSTV has been built on Super Sport. This guy, you may want to work with you. This one in red, she's answering all the questions. Yeah, what else? The Premier League, right? So quite a bit of the Premier League. Oh, she works for you? I can give you somebody. I'm going to go with her. We can swap. Yeah? So, I mean, circling back, in this whole world of different pieces of content, don't be cheated that you have to put all your money everywhere. What I can tell you for a fact, we have the widest library, the biggest library of content. But there's always the top grossing content. So you need to know the top grossing content, the top grossing influencers, and don't be tempted to want to spray your money everywhere. I am sure when I go into certain spaces, I don't get to see my favorite gene, maybe. But when I go into CNN, it's there. I wonder why you're on CNN, Enjoy, and why you're on BBC. There must be a lot of gin drinkers there, yeah? That watch a lot of that. So anyway, so closing, I was charged with the responsibility of speaking to you about content aggregation and content consumption. And I thought it would be such a disservice if I did speak to you about that and not show you the application in marketing and the at least the 4 pieces, the bare minimum, but also communication. We are doing a lot of, we used to do a lot of mainstream media, PR. We still do that quite a bit, but we're doing a lot more of mainstream, online PR, and of course choosing the highest grossers on bloggers and PR platforms. So content, I can tell you for a fact, the most watched content today is content on digital platforms. The highest grossing aggregators are on digital platforms today. And that is why, in my closing remarks, I don't want you to say that DSTV used to be, or GoTV used to be. Because in July, we are launching DSTV via streaming, no dish, no decoder, whatsoever. So you will watch World Cup on DSTV via streaming, and we are swimming downstream. We have chosen not to swim upstream. It's way too painful. Have a great evening, and let's ride the ride of digital together.